Makers and thought leaders have gathered in Durban for the 5th BRICS Summit this week. Samantha Loring caught up with Colin Coleman, Managing Director of Goldman Sachs for Sub-Saharan Africa, for his views on the relevance of the BRICS countries from a banking perspective.
The BRICS are going to be a very powerful force driving corporate transactions, driving economic growth and development in the world going forward. And China is very much the springboard of the BRICS. When you look at the BRICS, half of the GDP is represented by China, and they are the fastest growing and demographically most powerful group within the BRICS. But for the balance, South Africa within that is going to play an important role, and the China-Africa relationship and the relationship between Africa and these other countries is very, very important to the development of the continent. But globally, in terms of economic growth, the incremental growth that comes from the BRICS is going to dominate the next half century.
I mean, you were an architect, Goldman Sachs that is, of the ICBC Standard Bank transactions, so of course an example of investments between two BRIC nations. Are you seeing more and more of that happening, and any specific countries specifically right now that you're seeing the kind of collaboration and investments taking place between?
Yeah, well, China again is the mainstay of that cross-border investment, with Jinchuan buying Metarex, ICBC doing Standard Bank, CNOC involved in deals in Uganda and in Nigeria, and so on and so forth. A variety of examples of Chinese investment, and also Discovery's investment into Ping An are examples of outward investment from Africa into China. But there are other examples, such as Bharti investing in the African telecom space. That was a very big transaction that took place. And we're yet to see, I think, further investments from other BRIC countries into the African continent and from Africa outside into the BRICS. But it's certainly an evolving momentum.
From a policy perspective and from where you stand right now, of course, operating in the financial space, what needs to be done in order to speed up the process, basically?
Well, I think certainly confidence from each of those countries in each other, in the regulatory environment, confidence in the economic growth factors, and certainly in the post-global financial crisis, the fact that we are at a far greater period of stability helps those who want to put large amounts of investment to work to have the confidence to do it. And I would say all the factors about political stability, growth, and welcoming foreign direct investment and making that happen in an easy, smoothless way is very much part of that easing of investment into the future.
Now, one of the initiatives that are being mooted for supposed implementation at this conference is the Development Bank, BRICS Development Bank. Would that be a competitor to Goldman's in terms of your ambitions on the continent? I mean, how do you see the two of you fitting together in terms of business on the continent?
No, not at all. I think that it's far more going to be a competitor with other public sector banks like the World Bank or the African Development Bank, but I don't see them as competitors. Hopefully they cooperate and they supplement each other, but certainly not. The private sector shouldn't be doing the things that the public sector banks are doing, and vice versa, and the risk mitigants that can be put in place by any development bank, whether it's the BRICS Development Bank or others, to mitigate risks, guarantees on investment, to facilitate private sector investment, will help oil the wheels of the Goldman Sachs business or any other global investment bank.
Looking at implementation of this, and it's a great idea on paper, but practically what needs to be done right now, what do you think are the key issues that need to be ironed out in terms of how this BRICS bank will in fact work? Do you think that there's also space for another development bank in the world?
Absolutely. I think we're yet to see the scope and the mandate of the bank, and that's obviously at a political level what needs to be discussed and debated. Once they've debated and agreed on the broad scope, they then need to specify and dig into the mandate and very specific issues like who will manage this bank, and what's the governance of the bank, and what is the specific tools and instruments that will be used by this bank, and obviously the capitalization of the bank. So there's lots and lots of detail and meat on the bone that we'll need to see.
With $50 billion, which has been mooted as the initial kind of seed capital, if you could call it that, I mean, would you say that that gives it enough firepower to get it up and running and, I suppose, compete to a degree with the likes of the World Bank?
Well, I think we have to see, what the nature of it is. I think if I understand the the mentality of the BRICS nations, such as China. The point is to try and get specific projects that everyone can get their teeth into, such as the Inga Dam, for example, in the DRC, which needs large-scale capital that otherwise the private sector wouldn't be able to mobilize, and find the projects that develop the momentum over time. You know, the depth of capital available in many of these markets is such that for the right projects, I'm sure they will mobilize the capital. So there's one of these, it's one of these things that it will develop its own momentum, negative or positive, into the future, and we'll see how successful it is.